Hi, everybody. David Nour back with you for another Sales Community's Tech Sales Insights Live. I'm joined by my co-host, Randy Seidl. Hello, Randy.
Hey, Nour. How you doing?
Doing great, thanks. Good to see you. We've got one of your old friends from EMC as our guest today.
Yes, we do. And he's got some fancy artwork behind him. His taste has certainly changed.
Hello, Steve.
How you guys doing? Hi, Nour. Randy, good to see you guys again. I love what you're doing with the sales community. It's a great give back to this community that we all grew up in, and love seeing some of the other speakers and sharing the insights, because we all have something to give back.
It's great to have you. Thanks for the kind comment. Steve, for those that may not know as much about you, could you start with a brief introduction, kind of professionally where you've been, what you've done so far?
Sure. So I started out my career with Randy back, one of the first co-op students that EMC ever had way back when, and then had an opportunity to grow into the sales organization. You know,
you left out the zoo. I had a co-op student out of UMass.
That's right. That's right. And we, UMass kids are pretty gritty, and we learned that. And that was actually, I did an IBM co-op prior to that, but the EMC one was the one that kind of energized me. It was the culture, and it was the opportunity. And I ended up working for EMC through mid of the 2000s. But defining moments in one's career, I was leading a team in New York, New Jersey during 9/11, and that was certainly a transformational moment for me. We had an opportunity then to moved to Asia, and then we lived and worked in Asia for 4.5 years, which was a tremendous experience for me. And then we repatriated back to the West Coast and been here for the last 15 years. And I've been in, sales exec roles in big data, most recently in a company called Sumo Logic. And we just had the fortunate opportunity to go public in the last year. So it's been a good run in many ways. A lot of learnings along the way that, I take away from all this.
It sounds great. Love that story. And for our audience, Steve, Randy, and I recorded a podcast earlier today. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, salescommunity.com/podcast is a good place to go hear that episode. Steve, tell us a little about Sumo Logic. What do you guys do? Tell us what problem you solve.
Sure. So it's in the broader category, two different things we do. It's monitoring, troubleshooting, called observability. So you look at things that are being built in the public cloud. The drivers there are digital transformation and, public cloud adoption. Most of these microservices applications are built in the public cloud. What Sumo's done, we've been built this way. We're a multi-tenant SaaS platform built in the public cloud for scalability, for ease of use, and for flexibility. So our observability platform, huge TAM that we're going after there. And then we also have a security solution that is equally differentiated from, think of it as kind of a cloud SIM environment for security and protecting the perimeter. And those are our two big markets that we're going after.
So, Seidl, I want to take a trip down memory lane. It seems like a lot of the great leaders we've had on previous episodes cut their teeth early on in that EMC farm system. Talk a little about what made it successful, and could it be replicated today?
Yeah, I think obviously a bunch of us with EMC, but I think if you go back, PTC, parametric technology, had a similar culture. You go back before that, maybe Xerox to a certain degree, but I think it's really just just the hardcore, the focus. I don't want to say survival of the fittest, but really just kind of basic discipline. We were going up against IBM most of the time, so we were the small player. Now I always laugh with Billy and others that Dell EMC. It's a big card, but back in the day, nobody knew who we are. So that really forces you to be a lot more gritty. We would have I'd call it more traditional, probably blue collar backgrounds that, most of us were. So it's really kind of that grittiness and the passion to always continue to learn and to improve.
So Steve, I'm going to ask you the same question. What attracted you to that EMC culture early on? Because it seems to have set some fundamental traits in a lot of the leaders that kind of came from that time. What attracted you to the EMC world back then?
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, it was kind of like my second co-op one, and this one was before I was graduating. So it was just an opportunity to work with this young company. And at that point, we weren't even in Hopkinton. We were in Framingham, Massachusetts. And the energy was just, you lived it every day. And that it wasn't as Randy said, it was a pretty cutthroat culture of, you went into the sales training program and the graduation rate was not 100%. It wasn't even close to that. It was like 70%. We had people that made it and people that didn't make it, and they chose early. And then you look at the baseline of that company, not only sales focused, Dick Egan had this pillars of engineering, sales, and customer support, customer service was the three pillars that we all aligned on. But the humbleness of the leadership there, if I remember the conversations with Dick and Roger early on, either of them taking coming down to New York City, taking a cab to a customer call, not taking a, big town car or anything like that. They were just, they were humble people that we just learned from. And they, it's like I think if you look at it, the baseline of like, we're all the same. Titles don't matter. I remember the conversation with Roger, we graduated right from the inside program, and, we're all happy we graduated. And then you go into Roger's office, Roger Marino, the M&EMC, and he basically said, where do you want to go? I'm going to send you, and I got fortunate. I was supposed to go to Chicago. He goes, I'm going to send you to New York. But he follows it up with, anybody can sell in New York. So that's my baseline. So if you're not successful there, you're not going to make it.
Love it. Randy.
Yeah, Steve, I was talking to our mutual friend, Andy O'Brien, earlier, and he wanted me to pass along, I think it was a tongue-in-cheek joke. Wally Pincus from Chemical Bank is ready to bring the Guardian in now. But
we had a lot of fun back then, and that's what differentiated us. It was it was a work hard culture, like Randy spoke about. We did a lot of sales training. We didn't do kickoffs. We did quarterly kickoffs. Why? To just bring the energy back together once a quarter, and then the grit, determination that culture taught us was something I think we all carry forward today.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the market is heating up. The war for talent, I've always believed it's been there. Will continue to be there, and exceptional sales, particularly technology sales talent, is always going to be in demand. Steve, talk about some of the traits. You've hired some great sales reps. You've led some great sales teams. What are the traits in that interview process you're looking for that gives you a pretty high confidence that this person, maybe in the spring of their sales career, is going to do well? It's going to really succeed as they learn, as they grow in that journey. Sure.
I think the foundational ones there that you pull out of a conversation are the attitude, the effort. The effort goes to, do they have a good work ethic in terms of what they do? Did they have an intellectual curiosity in terms of, the space that they're in and the space that they might be interviewing in? Did they do their homework in preparing for that? Do they, what intrigues them about that opportunity, that environment that they might move to? And then, those are some of the soft skills, but it's the, somebody that's been through a lot of grit in their career life, I think is a leading indicator of somebody that's going to, they'll bounce back from the lows and be able to, gravitate to that. And then having a growth mindset of making sure that, they're looking to get better in terms of who they are, what they do. Like the things we do today at Sumo, it's like we're a collaborative culture. I call it extreme collaboration, because we expect our leaders and our individual contributors to collaborate with every function across the company. And the culture rejects mercenaries in that regard. That's effective, very effective in terms of, who we are, what we do. And it's a learning culture. You're expected to learn new tech. It's day in, day out, this world's changing, and you got to be able to adapt. And along with that, from the selling community, is like you got to be able to take on new technology for modern prospecting to be able to adapt to that and not be, my words, old school in terms of the way you do things. So you got to take on new tech and adapt to it to become a better person, but become a better engagement in terms of your selling process.
Randy, you.
Yeah. So we did a poll past couple of days on LinkedIn saying, what do you think a harder job is, SDR or rep? I think the latest has SDR at about 65% of the vote. My opinion is it's certainly much harder. It's like a boot camp, and you're really micromanaged, especially these days with all the call recording software, and there's really nowhere to hide. What's your take on the harder job?
I think the SDR thing, Randy, is harder, but think about that. If you break through that barrier and you're a successful SDR, I mean, the most successful sales reps to me are the ones that learn how to prospect, but they prospect. They view prospecting as one of the most important jobs they do, and they're not afraid to do it. They're not afraid to find new ways to get to the table to engage. The SDR is the foundation for a good seller because it learns how to create relationships and engagement. Certainly today has to become much more contextual. I mean, when we were doing it with EMC, we're just calling up people that we hope we get a hold of. Now the modern buyer knows more about you before you even engage. You have to make it more contextual. Why am I calling you? What am I solving for you?
For our audience, if you've just joined us, you're listening to Steve Fitz, the Chief Revenue Officer at Sumo Logic. Would love to have you jump in with questions. I think, Randy, we've got a question from Jesse.
All right, Jesse, thanks. Hi, Steve. Congrats with all the success you've had at Sumo Logic. What's your favorite productivity app that you couldn't live without?
I would say two of them, Jesse. One is, we've all used the CRMs for years, and we were an early user of the Clary platform, which kind of simplified, I would call it opportunity management, sales forecasting. And I love and live in Clary every day. And it simplifies kind of the Salesforce, wheels that we all been accustomed to in a much more intuitive format that a leader can look through and have a conversation with his team and reps about opportunity management. And that's for us, it's across both new customers, cross sells, and renewals, retention as well. But the second one is we use a different tool for prospecting and signals called 6 Sense. And it's one of these marketing attribution tools that tells you who's out there actually for your solution in the environment. So my analogy on that, it's kind of like a fish finder for sales, right? So I could go out in the ocean and drop my line in the water and hope I'm going to catch something. But if I have a fish finder, I know what's in the water right there. So I'm dropping my line in the water where the fish are. And that's what that allows you to do. 6 Sense allows our buyers to focus on who's in the market for your solution. And, you might have a relationship, you might not, but they're in the market for your solution. So that's where you need to both account-based marketing and targeting and such.
Wow, that's great. So maybe they can help you with your fishing in Chatham off the Cape.
That would be great. And a new boat would work with that too.
We go, well, Sumo Logic going public. I assume there's no issue there. Just a matter of what boat. But back on the tool side, Steve, are there functionalities that you wish you could have that you don't have today around looking at marketing or digital marketing or anything in the sales process?
We do a lot on this pipeline prosecution in terms of how do we move opportunities from, what's an MQL to stage 1, and then all through the stages, basically to stage 8, which is close 1 for us. But yeah, that's the conversion of that. And we track that with a lot of rigor across that spectrum. But that's not automated today. That's pretty much a manual process with us. So if there's a way to automate that in terms of I would call it the prosecution and signals, that's a need. Because I still feel today that's an Excel spreadsheet that we review on a regular basis. But if you could automate that some way, and I could look at a dashboard every morning, it'd be a lot easier.
Steve, I want to dig into the sales management, sales leadership role a second. I think you would agree that the best teams, and that's certainly been my experience, the best teams always win. What are you asking early on in either promoting an existing rep to a management role, or as you bring in managers? What are you looking for? What do you believe will really help them succeed in that geography or in that market sector?
Coach, are they a great coach from a conversational standpoint? I learned this early in my leadership career. It's like everybody's motivated a little bit differently. You have to unpack that, around things like situational leadership to understand who's motivated by what attributes and leverage that. I think the other aspects that are really important there is that, the learning aspect of a leader and always embracing new things to share with my team and share with my cross-functional folks as well to make us better. And then are they, do they inspire? Do they connect? Do they relate in that regard? And, obviously in the last year or so, that's been a little bit tougher because the in-person things has changed a lot. But those are the attributes that, we look at. It's, leadership is not easy. You got to make the tough calls, but you got to coach people. And I call it a balance of heart and edge, right? So you got to have empathy. We've all had a lot more of that in the last 12 months, and make sure that that's part of your makeup. And but you have to have some edge too, and that edge goes back to hold ourselves accountable and driven. Find the motivators.
Seidl, I know you've been at this game for a while, so I've got to ask, what is your favorite interview question, one or two, that may be beyond the obvious of a sales manager, of a sales leader?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of them, but one of my favorites are, who are your end user customer relationships? And even today with our recruiting business, I'm shocked. You can pick a city in the country, and more times than it should be, I know more CIOs, CTOs in that person's city than they know. And I say, how is it possible that you live in wherever, Chicago, Dallas, San Fran, LA, wherever, and you don't know, and you can't tell me right now? And then they go through this, I've been different companies. Like I've been at different companies. Like, how do you not have that relationship? And I think especially in today's COVID environment, certainly, relationships are just a huge plus, but I think that just tells so much about the person. And especially if you're in sales, you have to have those relationships. So that's one for sure I would key on. And I know from you, your prior book to Curve Benders with relationship economics, that you're violent agreement around relationships, and you might have some tidbits to share as well.
Yeah, and that's a great question to bring up, and it's amazing we all value relationships, yet we seldom bring them up in our interview, in our hiring, training, developing, elevating opportunities. Randy, that's a great one. What I'm actually looking for to build on that was the relationship a transactional one, right? You sold them something, thanks very much, see ya. Or did you actually invest in, over some period of time, the long tail viability of that relationship, the long-term success, right, and the outcomes from that relationship? I've had clients, I've talked about Casey Choi. He's hired me in like 4 different jobs, right? Or, we've all had clients who bought from us in different positions. And it's not because of any one product or service. It's the way we engage and influence and really help create a different outcome, for them. So, Steve, I'm going to ask you the same question. What's a favorite question you ask of a sales manager, sales leader that is beyond the obvious ones?
So here's one, and this was given to me a couple of years ago. It's like, what would people say about you behind your back? And what's shocking on that is that people, and this is the self-awareness factor, because I didn't talk about that when we talk about leadership, because I think you want your leaders to be self-aware, but it's like how people tend to answer that in a negative way versus a positive way. So And it says a lot about them. It's like, well, no, I do this. I got a great work ethic. I have relationships, and I have all these positive things. But how people kind of pivot to the negative sometimes. Which candidly, to me, it's a self-awareness. That's a self-awareness. Hey, need to scratch a little deeper there.
Absolutely. If you don't know what your brand is or what those brand attributes are, right, you're shooting in the dark. So let's go to a question from Susan. You brought up PLG. I'd love to learn kind of product-led growth. What impact does it have on the sales profession? Randy, maybe I'll start with you, and then we'll go to give Steve a chance to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fantastic. So if I owned a company, I would love to have product-led growth. Typically, one of several definitions is entry point is kind of a low-level developer, and then the solution just kind of grows within the company, and you don't necessarily need a high-priced enterprise go-to-market sales force that a lot of us have grown accustomed to. So in order to have the PLG, you really need to have the product market fit first. And if you have that, and the product can go and scale and grow, Datadog's probably a current example. VMware is probably one that, going way back, VMware now is this monster enterprise go-to-market engine, but kind of early on, they didn't have, enterprise selling was, nobody knew what that was, I think, till Casali got there. So, Steve, what's your take?
Absolutely. So, I mean, obviously the evolution of open source, especially in the tech community, allows us to, download the capabilities that we have from tech and then use them. And then I can use them from a free standpoint. And we have at Sumo, as an example, we have Sumo Logic free. You can use it. You're limited based on the, in our words, capacity, but allows you to try and buy, as you said. And I think if you look at the evolution of that and finding that, that DevOps manager or DevOps user or the SRE and the, cloud terminology, site reliability engineer that uses it, it's almost in many ways the best way to sell a solution because it becomes viral inside. And we've seen this with our biggest customers. Like, hey, I go call on the VP of engineering. This is where it kind of flips on its head. And he or she would tell me, it's like, Steve, I don't make those decisions. My users make those decisions. If you want to win that battle, you got to win it down here. By the time it gets to me, it's like I support the users in the community that are building the solutions and the products we're doing. So a lot of these customers are building digital facing applications. They're putting the power in the users and pushing it down. Therefore, those free versions are viral inside of most organizations today. And that seems that the way the tech's moving.
Seidl, we had the same comment from like Ed Sim and Peter Bell and others who said, if you get that developer community in their case, or that user community excited about it, you're going to create this market gravity or pull inside the organization that says, we want more of this stuff. So it absolutely reiterates Steve's comment. Let's talk about Susan's got, and I want to encourage our audience. We're getting some great comments. Elizabeth says, too many salespeople want to sell. They don't want to put in the hard work to build relationships. Exactly right. We've got another LinkedIn user jumping in. Thank you. Yes, absolute disqualifier. If you can't talk about the relationships you have in your own backyard, in your own community. So I would encourage you to jump in. We got some great questions coming in. So Susan wants to know, Steve, what does your biggest competitor do well?
And maybe who are your competitors, just for those that aren't that familiar with this?
Yeah, so it's a big TAM that we're going after. It's about a $55 billion TAM that we're going after. Splunk is the largest legacy competitor in there. And then we have open source versions like an Elastic. That's another. So two big public companies there. You referenced Datadog earlier. We've kind of the observability space. We compete against them. And then we have a different set of competitors as it relates to security and both modern SIEMs. You think of like even an HP ArcSight that still exists today, or an IBM QRadar, and we do compete or displace them as well. So,
Seidl, how much attention do you pay to competitors? How much of your bandwidth is really keeping up with competitors?
I mean, I think you always need to do that, but I think let them pay attention to you, right? You got your playbook, things that you're executing against, put together on sales community. Somebody from Force Management put on a great podcast yesterday, which was really all about, what is your differentiation versus somebody else? So it's kind of in old school terms. If there's going to be an RFP, what are the specs that make you better than whoever it is?
So it's a great example of something that I recently heard outside in leadership, right? So customer centricity, absolutely, but understanding competitive positioning, what are they working on, and more importantly, what are the needs in the market that customer, so kind of build on yours, what are the needs that customer communicated or uncovered, or a latent need that competitors tapped into, bringing those insights into the organization I found to be really useful. I want to switch gears again. Susan, thank you for jumping in. I think it's an important topic. Steve, I'm going to go to you first on this. You and I briefly talked about this, and I know Randy's passionate as well. The sales community, the sales space in particular, tech sales in particular, seems to be very male dominated, seems to be very much driven by knowledge workers. How do we create more equity? How do we create more opportunities for those underrepresented communities that represent increasingly more our customer base?
First off, we acknowledge it, and we as leaders acknowledge that there's a gap there, and we got to fulfill that gap. So we have to consciously address that, and then you got to take the initiatives. I mean, I go through recruiting calls with my team on a weekly basis, and we're consciously looking to build the diversity, equity of the organization, and you have to do it from a leadership perspective, and you have to embrace it. I think the biggest thing that we've seen is that it's real, it's front and center, and your ability to address it starts with acknowledgement and then action. And taking that action, we're a public company now, so we adhere to a lot of different things. We just took our whole company through, DEIB training from that regard, and that's just it's to educate everybody on what the world needs to look like, and then how you can change it as an IC, as a leader, and it does create a community because the awareness is not as deep as it needs to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people try and say, okay, with the current population of diversity that's there, how can you kind of make sure you promote it, what you need to do? But I think the problem is you need to go back even further and go back into the college ranks and say, sales as a profession is something that, everybody can do well with. So how do you get that attention and awareness? And Boston College is an example. That business school is harder to get into than arts and sciences, and typically, if I can profile, if it's okay to say, more females, initially out of high school will say, hey, I want to go into arts and sciences, not school of management. But then once they're there, they say, geez, I might be interested. So BC's done a great job in a whole bunch of different kind of crossover programs by thinking, I think it's really, how can business get back into the university environment and pull female and other diverse groups into the sales profession to say, hey, it's something great, something, I don't say it's easy, but, at least in my case, it wasn't one that, really went after your GPA, right? You could kind of still get hired.
Steve, is it me or does Seidl plug in BC and the Patriots every chance he gets? Is it just me or?
I haven't heard the Patriots yet. But I'm sure we're going to hear a Belichick analogy coming out of that.
28-3, and I live in Atlanta, so 28-3 inevitably comes up in every conversation somehow, somewhere, right? Have you seen the weather? 28-3. It just comes up. So thank you for that, Mr. Seidl. So
I will bring that, David, if I can, though,
please.
We've actually had a great university in the Midwest, and talk about diversity. We've got an equal amount of females come out of there as we do male candidates. And Ohio University has a sales curriculum, so you can actually get a degree in sales, which candidly, up until probably 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't know that. They're one of a few that actually have a sales degree. And I tell you what, some of the most grounded young people, gritty, hardworking, no sense of entitlement. And we've seen both one of the top sellers that we had last year was a female that, matriculated from an SDR to an inside seller. And, she was on stage with us. So just seeing that, I mean, BC is a great school, but
love that. Love that.
We don't have a sales program, but great point. I know Florida State, Anthony Robbins' daughter is there. We're going to have her on, one of these, but there is, you would think, sales in academia. I mean, how many people go into sales and you're never trying, I don't know if you master the program, but, really aren't, properly trained in that.
So, Randy, I think a great idea in the sales community, if you haven't done this yet, maybe put a list of university programs that either have sales or emphasize sales, or I think everybody's looking for that sharp, maybe spring in their careers, SDR, BDR types that we can all recruit from these universities and really bring them in and mold them like the old EMC. What did Greg Scorzilio talked about, the hunting school that EMC had and kind of developed them into, I think, sales professionals we all need. So great question. So thank you. Please jump in. And I appreciate Mike and Brian and company kind of keep driving that 28-3 dagger in. So thanks for that. Unbelievable. Let's go to Rick. Should marketing report to the CRO? Let me start with you, Steve.
I don't think so. But I think the relationship between the CRO and the CMO is probably one of the most important cross-functionally in any company. I've had good relationships there. And I've seen it on the other end of the spectrum. I think it's so important that the candor between marketing and sales is there. So you look at things that you address issues that matter, your pipeline, where your opportunities are coming from, how you're prosecuting those across that spectrum. And that element of candor and trust needs to be built and established not only at the leadership, but also, throughout the two organizations. And if that exists, it works. So I don't think it should report to the CRO.
This reminds me of the high school or college debate team. So Randy Seidl, take the other side. Why should?
No, don't worry. You don't have to problem. Yeah, I think it should, and it's great that you have a fantastic relationship. I think it's really about kind of metrics, ROI, and OpEx, right? So too many times marketing is wasting money. They don't have the appropriate metrics. There's not an appropriate ROI. Sales is sitting there saying, "Look, I can go hire reps. I can do kind of roll my own lead gen programs." And then conversely, I think the super strong CMOs are the ones that also can be, CROs over time. So I see eventually that coming together and just helps keep kind of church and state all in one, so to speak.
So Seidl, build on that. We talked about marketing. I'm going to ask you about channels. So talk to me about some attributes of great channels. And Steve, I'm going to come to you and ask you, what are some of the yellow, if not red flags you've seen in the channel environment? Seidl, over to you.
Yeah, but I think you have the two extremes. If you're a early startup company, your channel is basically you create all the interest, and then you need to go leverage somebody else's relationships and paper in order to get the deal processed, right? So that's just kind of a necessary evil. The best ones that can do the extra selling without you. And the probably the best story I would tell is, I think too many times reps, for whatever reason, want to have the control. And even though it's kind of channel neutral in terms of the compensation plan, they just don't leverage it. So if I would always joke to say, hey, I'm gonna make up a person, I'm gonna have a territory, I'm gonna have the channel call on that territory, and I'm gonna bet that given the right situations, that rep with, even though it's nobody could actually do well. But too many times the reps do not really look at the channel as extra feet on the street for themselves.
So Steve, flip the coin. What are some yellow or red flags in a channel relationship that says it's just not working, or we need to fix something, or double down and really make that force multiplier that it can be?
Yeah, well, Randy touched on. I think you have to educate the your own team, because a lot of times what you see happens there is, hey, I got to take a haircut because I got to take it through the channel, which to me is kind of like just so naive in terms of that force multiplier effect of how they are. And depending on what you're selling and who you're selling to, like for us, security is very much a channel-led, buyer market opportunity. We work with the likes of an Optiv, of companies like GuidePoint, Defy, but they're very specialized in who they are, what they do, and they represent a broader ecosystem of security players. So you need to tap into that, and you got to leverage that. But I'm not counterpointing him here. I'm kind of more agreeing to him because I think it is a force multiplier if done right. You gotta create your focus, and you always have to educate the what's in it for me.
So let's switch gears. Great Wall Street Journal article, I think earlier today, that 7 million households moved to another county in 2020. That's 500,000 more than they did in 19. A lot of people we all know are changing jobs, changing companies, going into new roles. I want to talk about the first 90 days. Steve, I want to ask you first. First 90 days in a sales management, sales leadership role, what are you focused on? What do you prioritize? And given the remote challenges of this pandemic, how are you doing that if you can't physically go see people and hug customers or touch the reps and managers and territories?
So from a leadership perspective, it's all about the people. It's getting to know the people. We've hired plenty of leaders during the pandemic, and I think the best ones that have done that is they go way down the organization pretty quick. They find out what's working, what kind of needs to be fixed, and you kind of get that noise, those signals that allow you to kind of put here's the things I think I need to address. But I think one of the most important things early on for any leader is the customer and the customer touch, and learning from them directly, not indirectly through your people, about what do they like you about what you do. Why do I differentiate? How sticky am I as a partner, supplier to you? And those are some of the things that I think new leaders, you don't want to put a process in place day one. You want to listen, learn, absorb, and then put something together. That might be day 60. It could be a little bit later what you want to do, but I don't think you come in and kind of flip the card over day one.
Seidl, let me ask you the same question. Let's build on Steve's comment. First 90 days in a sales management, sales leadership role, beyond the comment Steve made, what else are you focused on?
Absolutely. No, just before I go, you had flashed up before the comment from Robbie. She's probably the world expert in terms of community sites. So Robbie, thanks for being in on this, and thanks for your comments. So for the first 90 days, I think the best thing, which again may be a lost art, but just a written 30, 60, 90-day plan. So whether you're a CEO or CRO going into a new job, I always say whatever your plan is, probably 99% of it you should be able to share. So at a high level, the concept is you kind of go in and you listen for the first 30 days. Next 30 days, you're kind of assessing, coming up with some game plans. Kind of third 30 days, you kind of have your plan and say, here's what's going on. So as a new leader going in, that's something that people appreciate. They can give their input. That you may or may not listen to their ideas, but at least that you're listening as opposed to coming in with your own playbook. And then if you go down to an individual contributor, a lot of people come on as SDRs and say, hey, what does it take to have me get to a rep? I say, well, you should have a plan in writing and criteria. And also, if you have an effective 90-day plan, you're able to sort out any bad apples, so to speak. And they also realize what's that objective criteria that they need to meet in order to be successful. And too many times, I'm sure Steve and I have both gone into organizations where all of a sudden you're performance managing people out. And they've been there 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And you say, how is this possible? Why don't we catch the fatal flaws kind of in the first 3 months?
That's a great lens, great perspective. So it sounds like we've got a question from Rick. Steve, what metrics do you hold marketing accountable to?
It's all about so we say you got 50% of your pipe is actually from the seller, which includes your partner side, and then 50% comes from demand gen, which is marketing. So that's both inbound and outbound, and that's part of the SDR organization that works with marketing on targeted outbound as well. And so we hold each other accountable for that, for where opportunities come from. But then we collectively, it's I would say cross-functional accountability for pipeline prosecution. And each stage has a conversion metric, and we track that religiously. And we look at what's not working, what's working, and seeing how we need to change those metrics to put them to a more positive place.
Seidl, I know over the years that I've known you, one of your biggest frustration is the perceived waste of valuable resources within that marketing function. that don't seem to really support the revenue growth. How do you take that discreetly, subtly to either your CMO counterpart or the leadership team to talk about a more prudent and aligned investment from marketing to support revenue growth?
Sure. I think it's really all around, metrics. So the, good news, bad news is sales, sales has the number, but, similarly for marketing, it's not all this, kind of touchy feely branding awareness mumbo jumbo, which is nice, but kind of what are some of those other specific measurable metrics that tie into the MQLs that result to SQLs and actually, deals in pipeline that happens.
By the way, for our audience, marketing mumbo jumbo is a very technical term. You might not be familiar with it, but keep coming back and we'll build on that. So we've got a follow-up question from Jesse. Should SDR report to the CMO or CRO? Steve?
I think the CRO, we've had that debate where I'm at now, and I've had a debate in other companies. If your SDR path is my words, farm system for, career and opportunity, which what we created, we hired people out of school, maybe first or second job, and then we give them opportunity to move into, a mid-market sales role, or then it'd be, they might choose to go into a technical role to be an SE, or even a customer success role. So for that reason, you're part of that function organization. I think it should belong in the, the revenue organization.
Here comes Seidl. You believe the same?
Yes.
Got it. So here comes a kudos from one of our LinkedIn users. Says Steve practices what he preaches. Whenever I ask him to make a call with me, it's always where and when. How can I help? Let's go. If the sales org knows in their hearts of hearts that the CRO is ready and willing and actually enjoys and embraces customer interactions, you can't outprice, you can't put a price on that in terms of building culture, holding team accountable. Steve, talk about the behaviors CROs in your role need to model for not just the sales, but the rest of the organization.
So whoever was on that comment, it's like lead from the front, walk the talk. We all put our shoes and socks on the same way. My title means nothing. I'd actually prefer just to have leader there versus whatever that, chief something is. I didn't make that up. So somebody gave that to me. But I don't feel entitled in that way. I feel like, I did it as a practitioner. The best path that you have as a coach and a leader is to have them watch you in that situation, in that movie. And to be honest, I mean, I get energized when I'm in front of customers. So it's an opportunity to just, if I have a week where I have a lot of customer engagement, it's probably the best week. And that's where, we all need a little bit more of that. It's like the more people you touch, both externally and internally, has an impact on you and the team that supports you. So,
Randy, over to you. Yeah, totally agree. Well said, Steve. Another thing, just going back on the marketing side and sales calls, is I'm always a big fan of marketing, going on sales calls and participating. And even now with Zooms, it makes it that much easier. But also too, if they're going to, in the days when we get back to travel, I would say, hey, look, if you live in Boston, if you go to vacation in San Fran, you visit family in San Fran, go a couple of days earlier, you can expense a flight, go face to face, meet with customers, meet with partners. Then even better yet, in the from a executive sponsor perspective, be an for those that are marketing leadership, be an executive sponsor for whatever account, because there's an unlimited number of accounts that would love to have, that attention exposure. And what better way for marketing to really know what customers want, think, and feel than having those relationships themselves.
It's a great point. Again, Dennis Sadlowski is the former CEO of Siemens Energy and Automation, big advocate of this idea of outside-in leadership. He actually instituted that the entire leadership team, HR, IT, legal, finance, go out and meet with customers, go out and see real live paying customers. And when I asked him about that, he said exactly what the two of you said. Not only do you get energized, but you get unfiltered insights from the people you're creating value for that then you bring back to the organization and really help the entire team think differently. So great comment from Elizabeth. From a career pathing and succession planning perspective, leaders must understand where that SDR is coming from, where they want to go. Not all SDRs aspire to be an AE. Great point.
Well said.
Thanks for jumping in. We have a question from Rob. Have the KPIs you use changed in any way over the past year, especially with new channels becoming important over the last year with the pandemic and addition of social selling? Steve, KPIs.
Yes, in that regard, because you think of most of the pipe a lot of the pipe we do in tech is based on a lot of big shows that happen. You know, we participate in AWS reInvent and a lot of the security shows, and that's going away. So you're doing now virtual events. You're doing more, I think, targeted events around what I would say a smaller community. So have the KPIs changed? Yes, but it's forced you to kind of address the audience that you want to go after a little bit differently. And I think it's actually been in a positive way because, you know, for us as an example, a lot of the show pipe we get coming off a big show, it's not necessarily the best pipe. It's somebody coming by for, you know, a conversation or maybe something you're giving out at the booth versus somebody that really wants to come and kick the tires or test out what you're doing.
Randy, KPIs. Have you heard them, seen them change, evolve? How so during this pandemic?
Yeah, I think they probably I hear it a lot more from my CRO friends in terms of being not to keep jumping on marketing here, but they are really so much more dependent upon getting ROI from marketing, right? The old days of kind of flying around and you can kind of massage and work some things. The engine has to be cranking and it has to be going. So I think they're all the more vital and important.
Steve, our next question from Rick is one that inevitably comes up in almost every one of these sessions, which is, how do I get promoted from an SDR?
You put the effort in, you put the attitude in, you put the, you do what you're supposed to be doing from a practitioner standpoint. You're not afraid to, especially in this world, ask how I get better. And I think the ones that, it's interesting that you say that because we have a lot of our SDRs that come to us and say, hey, I've been doing this 6 months and I'm ready. Okay, so what makes you think you're ready? And then you have to kind of just coach them in terms of, I believe in micro progressions. Here's the path we're going to give you. It's going to be probably 12, maybe 15 months. And if you achieve these objectives, we're going to promote you and we're going to give you that opportunity. And if you don't, you might be on a little bit longer path. But if you look at getting better versus trying to jump to, hey, I'm here 3-6 months and I think I can become an enterprise seller, sorry, you're missing it. There's a lot of things you didn't learn that you're going to need to learn that are going to help you along that way if you take the path of micro progressions and getting better a little bit at a time.
I'm sorry, why just enterprise seller? Is the CEO position not available? Because I've been here 3 months. I'd like to be the CEO next. Is that possible? Is that no? Rick, I want Randy's comment as well, but just a data point for our audience that you may have kids. I distinctly remember having this conversation with one of my kids who played year-round soccer, and he wanted these really bright, I would call them borderline obnoxious soccer shoes. And the conversation that we had was, let your playing do the talking for you. Let your growth, let your execution on that field, let your heart and your hustle kind of separate you from everybody else versus the flashy shoes. And I don't know why or how, maybe from his coach, certainly not from me, listened and was a top scorer that year, right? And that's how you get to become the captain. That's how you get. So it's amazing how much in our personal lives transfer very nicely to our professional lives as well. Seidl, how about you? How does Rick get promoted from to build on Steve's comment from an SDR?
Yeah, I'm pretty coin operated, so I think it comes down to kind of those metrics, right? So it's what are the metrics, how you performing against those, aligned with kind of some period of time, and the strong companies make that very, very straightforward, and companies that aren't so strong, it's kind of this kludgy, squeaky wheel process, which is bad.
So I love that, Rick. Hope that helps. Let's go to our Elizabeth is on a roll here with these great questions. So let's see. Question for the panel: as a C-level stakeholder, what type of virtual events resonate most with you, If a CRO, would you be most likely to attend if the event only other CROs or other revenue leaders attended? Or would you want to attend an event with other cross-functional leaders? Steve?
I think it's a networking opportunity. So if you bring somebody together and I can learn from somebody else, that's an attraction. I'm not a big fan of sending me, some type of bottle of booze, and it just, but bring somebody that actually, like I did one this week with one of the companies I referenced earlier we had General Stanley McChrystal. I mean, like his book, Team of Teams. I mean, like I would spend any living moment I could in front of him just learning from it. So give me something that I'm going to learn from.
Elizabeth, if I could build on that, I've always believed people fundamentally gather for two reasons: content and community. What can I learn? Who else will be there? Who else can I get to know that I wouldn't have a chance to do otherwise? So particularly with, busy executives, I do a lot of, these smaller micro gatherings of senior leaders and board members. You want that expensive real estate on their calendar. That content and the community's got to be compelling, and it's got to be of equal business stature, equal peers that do that. So if you've just joined us, you've missed a good one. This is something we do every week. Sales Community Tech Sales Insights. There's a podcast with Steve Fitz, the Chief Revenue Officer of Sumo Logic, this morning, and then we invite our guests to come join us on a LinkedIn Live. That we love this live Q&A, a live discussion with our audience. Lots more data, lots more insights, a lot of great folks on the sales community environment. Randy, share a little with our audience. You've got, I think, again, another technical term. You call it a no-brainer.
No-brainer, exactly. Well, you just said, what was it? Content and community. So that's probably the epitome of sales community. We might have to change our tagline, but the idea is individual contributor on up to CRO like Steve, CEO. If you want to learn more and sell more, we have a no-brainer 30-day free trial for those that are Sumo Logic. I'll be sending Steve a email after this that he can forward along to everybody. But no-brainer 30-day free trial. The reason we do it is because it works. If you want to cancel afterwards, no problem at all. But obviously works out well. And this is our 29th episode, I think, Nour. So thank you so much. And next week we have Steve Korndell, who is a early riser, started out a SDR himself and became a CRO at Turbonomic. And they just had a recent exit to IBM. I think in the press, the numbers are somewhere between 1.5 and $2 billion. So I'm sure that'll be great. And Steve, thank you so much. Fantastic wisdom. So psyched to watch your continued success.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks, Nour. Really appreciate it. And I love what you guys are doing. So early sellers, you got to tap into this because there's a trove of information and experience here that Randy and that's put together in the sales community. And I think it's priceless.
For our audience, mark your calendars. Wednesday, noon Eastern. Come on LinkedIn Live. We're also on Facebook. We're on YouTube. Come join us. Would love to have your questions, your comments for our guests. On behalf of Randy Seidl, I'm David Nour and Sales Community. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
Take care.